In today's show, what ports you are going to get on your MacBook Pros, what colours they might be, and how the iMac is going to influence Apple's design going forward. iCave's spring-loaded coverage is brought to you by CleanMyMac X, the all-in-one cleaning and optimizing software for your Mac. No matter how flawless and perfect new Apple products may seem, they still need good care to keep the best performance, protect from vulnerabilities, and prevent possible issues. CleanMyMac X is an app that handles these issues and helps to top up your Mac's performance. CleanMyMac X is more than just a Mac cleaner. It doesn't show you the files you already know you have, it deep scans your Mac for temporary files and app leftovers that aren't so easy to find manually. A single smart scan examines your system for log files and user cache that's no longer needed, runs a quick malware check, and does some optimization to help speed up your Mac all in just a few seconds. Gives you more control over apps and their files. Find out what apps and programs you have on your Mac and uninstall those that you don't need. Plus, CleanMyMac X recently rolled out native Apple Silicon support for Macs. If you're a lucky owner of the latest Mac model, be ready to enjoy a smooth ride at faster CleanMyMac X performance with your new Mac, as well as keeping track of permissions so you can see which apps are accessing your Mac's camera and microphone. Link is in the description to check out a free trial, which of course helps to support this channel too. What iMac 2021 means for MacBook Pro redesigns. Not many people were expecting to see the redesigned MacBook Pros at the April event, and I gave it an outside chance, but most think the earliest we'll see them is WWDC in June. I still think there's a half-decent chance of an event in May, but I accept that this is probably mostly wishful thinking. I'm very comfortable though saying that the M1X or M1 Pro potentially will be with us before the end of the year. I don't think they're going to wait until M2 has arrived before they release M1X. That just doesn't make any sense and it would be much more confusing for people. There's a lot to cover about the MacBook Pros on this show in terms of some leaks that we've had about the ports. We actually have some confirmation of these, it looks like. Now, we've got a lot to talk about with these things, between why we don't already have them and the specs apparently leaked out of Quanta Computers, who are building them, along with how they could look based on the latest iMac redesign and what that means for the notebooks. But before we get on to MacBooks, a quick note on why we got this iMac when we did. Now, I have a theory that Apple wanted to release all of their M1X variants together, so the iMac, the MacBook Pro 14-inch, 16-inch, and the Mac Mini. However, I think the reason that they've had to push the M1 version of this iMac out early is because they have started to run out of Intel chips. Because of all of the beef that Intel apparently has now with Apple, who was still a customer at the time, I think that Tim Cook has basically laid the smack down and basically said, we are not buying another Intel chip, so we need to roll these out a little bit quicker, and I am quite happy with that. I think that the reason we haven't got any of the M1X stuff, which I think was also planned probably to come out at the same time as the iMac with M1, is because of the difficulties with producing these mini LED panels that are being branded as XDR panels for the iPad Pro. There's been a lot of reports about the yields being very low with these, but the 12.9-inch iPad Pro got them yesterday. I feel like the Macs are probably going to be in much lower volumes than this iPad Pro, so they probably pushed them back a little bit so that they can get the iPad Pro out the door. But we do have an unusual leak apparently from a Russian hacking group who have apparently got their hands on plans from Quanta Computer. Now, it seems that the group are trying to get a ransom from Apple for these plans, so I won't name the group because I don't want to publicise what they're doing, but it seems that they have the full details of not just what ports are coming, but also the arrangement of them on the MacBooks and more. And to be completely honest, now that this information is out there in the open, I feel like if I don't cover it, you'll be asking me why I didn't, and if I do cover it, then it's kind of like, am I supporting this? I'm not supporting it, but it's still interesting. So assuming that these leaks are correct, the specs look pretty legit. Right hand side of the MacBook gets an HDMI port, a Thunderbolt 3 port, and a USB-C port, along with the SD card reader. Then on the left, you get 2 more Thunderbolt 3 ports and Apple's MagSafe charging port. Oh, and these refer to the product codes J314 and J316, 14 and 16. Yeah. So that's the technical stuff out of the way. We've already talked about M1X. We already know what that's going to do. If you've not seen that video already, you can check just up here, which is where the video with our calculations, which kind of match up pretty closely with Luke Miani's, which is cool. You can check that one out, and that has got a whole bunch of information on how we calculated it as well as which other computers it's going to be vaguely in line with. Spoilers, it's probably going to be one of the fastest Macs ever. But obviously, as of this week, the most important thing is what colour they're going to be. So let's head back over to the new iMac and see what we can work out from that. First of all, we have blue, green, pink and silver available in the base configuration, with yellow, orange and purple adding to that on the step up when you get Touch ID, Ethernet and more holes in the back as well. All of these are M1 though, so if we are going to have a more powerful version, or a Pro version if you will, like an M1 Pro, that could fill out some of the darker colour options that are missing, because there's been a lot of people asking where their space grey is. So we could have potentially slate or space grey, or perhaps a Pacific blue or product red in the Pros. Now, I know there are a lot of people annoyed at the white bezels, which I actually quite like, but there is a risk that white display bezels could actually affect the way that your eyes perceive colour on the screen, so they're not ideal for professionals who might be doing colour grading work. But maybe in the Pro one, and the people that are more likely to need that kind of accuracy in their colours, we could have those darker black bezels to know that you're on a Pro, just like the Space Grey iMac went from silver to Space Grey, so you knew it was more Pro. We could even get black keys on the matching keyboards. So what does this mean for the MacBooks? Well, I asked Apple tomorrow to help me out with visualising some of the possibilities. And if we're saying that the new iMacs are inspired by the G3 iMac, the consumer notebook should also be inspired too, but by the iBook. So perhaps the MacBook Air, when it gets its own redesign, could be getting those light coloured display bezels, and I think that would be pretty awesome for casual users, and will most likely come in a bunch of different colourways as well. Want all the bright colours? You can get them in your new MacBook Air. But in the MacBook Pro with M1X, the new flatter design language could also get the darker colours and black display surrounds, just like the Space Grey or Slate, a deep red, Pacific Blue or more. Now in our renders we have imagined that the palm rest and trackpad gets a single piece of glass that spans the width from the front edge of the MacBook, reflecting the style of the iMac's chin, but also giving some functional advantages too, like potentially having MagSafe pads either side of that trackpad for charging accessories or your phone, or allowing the whole of that front edge to work with Apple Pencil. So what do you think? Could dark bezels be the new Pro for Apple, with light mode display surrounds being our more consumer items? Let me know down in the comments, and leave some love for Apple tomorrow's work down there too. We've got a new Notification Squad member, Timothy Clark. Welcome to the team, and we are going to get into some iCave answers.
Marcin Kowalczyk asks, iCave answers. I wonder what happens if you plug more than one display via dock to the new iPad with M1?
Now, it's going to be very tricky for me to answer this, because I don't think many people have got hands on this new iPad with M1 yet, but my guess would be it will either try and mirror them, or it will only work on the first one that you plugged in. That is my best guess, but if anyone's got any better answers for me on that one, hit me up down in the comments.
Thomas E. asks, iCave answers. I'm wondering if I'm wrong about my thinking on the performance on the M1 iMac. Given their performance claims that the GPU will be up to 50% higher than the existing highest-end GPU on the 21-inch iMac, it implies that the thermal solution allows Apple to clock the M1 significantly higher than in the Mac Mini. My guess is that higher clock speeds will mean this computer will benchmark about 20% faster than the M1 Mac Mini if you get the 8-core GPU.
Now, I'm not 100% sure exactly which part it was you were talking about here, because I've looked through the event again and I couldn't find that claim, but that doesn't mean that I've not seen it. Maybe it was on the website or something, but I don't see it being overclocked. I don't think that these chips are something that you can really clock up a bit. I think if you put more voltage through them, it's just going to kind of ruin the chips quite quickly, because the whole point is they're so well balanced for power consumption, heat dissipation, and the performance that you get from them. So I don't think that they would be doing that with it. I mean, it could be that it's slightly different silicon, but it doesn't make any sense that it would be, because M1 should just be M1, should just be M1, and hopefully that is the case. Of course, if it is faster, then brilliant, but I'm not quite sure how.
Tech Hyped asks, iCave answers, where do you see Apple in next 10 years? And thoughts on Tim getting replaced by?
So I don't think Apple is in any danger in the next 10 years. Obviously, Tim Cook has spoken in the past couple of months, and he said that he is planning to retire within the next 10 years, which is absolutely fine. The gentleman is, I believe, about 60 at the moment, so fair play to Tim. He's still going strong, and he's one of the probably fittest people. He looked like a proper action star in that in that Mission Impossible chunk of the iPad introduction. So very impressed with that. I don't think Tim's going to be rushing out the door in terms of who's going to replace him. Probably going to be Jeff, can't remember his second name, but Jeff, who is the COO, the operating officer at the moment. It's not going to be Air Force One, I don't think. He is very charismatic, which is great for events, but it's also not how you run a company. So I think it's probably unlikely that he will be stepping up, but he may well step up and take on a bit more of the duties at the events.
Eugene King asks, iCave answers, do you think Apple will restrict the Mac Mini to the M1 chip or allow it to have more powerful Apple silicon as those chips are released?
Okay, so I think we should probably do a whole video on this, but when you look at Apple's website, you can kind of see what is still going to be replaced with higher end models. So right now, we still have the higher end, technically higher end, Mac Minis that have Intel inside, so the chances are that they will be replaced with a higher spec Mac Mini. That makes a lot of sense. In the same way, obviously, we've eliminated most of the smaller iMacs from the website, but actually one still remains there, which is the 1099 version with Intel, and I don't imagine that Apple wants to keep that around for much longer. I can't imagine they've got much stock left. I have a feeling that what I was saying about yesterday, about the idea that the M1 could come down in price a little bit when M2 arrives, I think that's what's probably going to happen, and then Apple will be able to replace that 1099 model with Apple Silicon as well. But in terms of the Mac Mini, which is your actual question, yes, I definitely think that this is going to be getting an M1X version or something similar, whatever the name of it is. There will be a more powerful version of it coming, and it will replace those higher end, more expensive Intel ones.
Jay Lotta asks, iCave answers, do you think the new iPad Pro is better value as it's around £150 cheaper than the M1 MacBook Air and has an extra GPU core?
So again, as with many of these questions, it completely depends on your use case, because if you need something that runs Final Cut Pro, an iPad is not much use to you right now. If you need something with a keyboard and trackpad, so obviously you can get these for the iPad Pro, but they are not cheap. It's £350, I think. So you're looking then at not £1,100, but £1,450, and then you're well into beyond MacBook Pro territory of the kind of entry level now. So I don't see why it's worse value. It's not that it's worse value, it's not that it's better value, it's different, because it just works in a very different way. The kind of apps that you use are probably more photography based, things like that. There are a lot of things that you can do on an iPad Pro, but not everything still, unfortunately. But it's getting closer.
Daniel Corby on Twitter asks, iCave answers, do you worry that the reason we get M1X was due to the chip shortage? It's easier to keep a chip in production that works rather than fabricate a new one that needs testing and multiple redesigns when you only have X amount of material to work with.
This touches on a couple of the different points that I've made in the past about minimizing the number of chips. For example, using the same chip, the same silicon for the iPad Pro and for the M1 Max. I thought they were still going to give it the old name, because that's exactly what we thought that A14X was going to be anyway. But they've just made it even simpler and just gone, we use the same chip here, and it's blowing people away in a laptop, and it's going to blow people away in a tablet. So that all works. In terms of chip shortages, by all accounts, Apple has not really been affected very much by these chip shortages. The only thing that it has seemed to affect is potentially displays, and also like general PCBs, not the chips themselves, but the PCBs that stuff goes onto. But Apple has got a huge amount of sway with TSMC, and they are at the front of the queue pretty much for any capacity that they've got. So Apple probably not in too much danger from the chip shortages right now, but obviously still something to keep an eye on. And I've kind of explained why I think that everything was delayed at the beginning of this video. If you missed that, skip back, you can watch that again. So that's it for this show, guys. Thank you so much for watching, and I will catch you in the next one.